You are banned from Thanksgiving, idiot. My mother's text message popped up on my screen while my sister Jasmine sent a row of laughing emojis. I sat in my corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline and simply typed back one word. Okay. Then I opened my banking app. 2 hours later, their holiday feast crumbled when the lights went out and the catering van turned around. My phone lit up with 67 missed calls, but I was already on a plane to the Maldives. Before I tell you how I humbled my toxic family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind people who actually pays the bills. My name is Nia, and I am 32 years old. To the world, I am a crisis management director for one of the top firms in Buckhead. I fix million-dollar mistakes for celebrities and CEOs. I turn disasters into opportunities. But to my family, I am just the help. I am the invisible wallet that keeps their delusions of grandeur afloat. It was Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I had just finished a grueling conference call saving a tech client from a PR nightmare. The adrenaline was still humming in my veins when my personal phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. It was a notification from our group chat named Family Blessings. I picked it up expecting the usual request for money or a demand to run an errand. Instead, I saw a wall of text from my mother Bernice. Nia, do not bother coming to the house this Thursday. You are banned from Thanksgiving, idiot. Brad and Jasmine have invited some very important investors from the city. These are high-class people, Nia. We cannot have you sitting there with your sour face and your cheap department store clothes. You tell everyone you are just an assistant, and it makes us look low-class. We need to impress these people. I stared at the screen. My hand tightened around the phone. An assistant. I had been a vice president for 2 years. My department store clothes were tailored Italian suits, but they never noticed. They only saw what they wanted to see. Then a message popped up from Brad, my sister's husband. He was a 30-year-old white man who claimed to be a cryptocurrency visionary, but had not held a steady job in 4 years. Sorry, Nia. Nothing personal. But my guests are elite level. We need a certain vibe at the table. You understand. Then came Jasmine, my 28-year-old sister. The golden child. The influencer with bot followers and a leased lifestyle. She sent 3 laughing face emojis and a gif of a door slamming. Make sure you send the gifs, though. Just leave them on the porch, she wrote. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same feeling I got right before I dismantled a hostile reporter in a press briefing. I looked at my calendar. I had a meeting with a board of directors in 20 minutes. I looked at my bank balance, which sat comfortably in the 7 figures. I did not type a paragraph defending myself. I did not call them crying. I did not beg to be included in a dinner where I would be mocked. I typed 5 letters. Understood. I set the phone down face up. The silence in my office was deafening. For years I had played my role. The dutiful daughter, the supportive sister. I thought if I gave enough, paid enough, and fixed enough, they would eventually love me. But reading those messages, I realized the truth. They did not love me. They loved my utility, and they had just fired me from the job of being their family. I unlocked my phone again and opened my banking application. I needed to see it. I needed to see the numbers, to remind myself of the reality they were ignoring. I swiped through the transaction history for the last 30 days. It was a digital paper trail of my own exploitation. There was a charge from 2 weeks ago, $600 at the luxury main salon. I closed my eyes and the memory played out in my head. I was visiting my parents' house to drop off groceries. Jasmine was screaming in the kitchen because her credit card had been declined. She had a stylist waiting in the chair and she was humiliated. She threw her phone at the wall and screamed that I was selfish for having money while she struggled. My mother had looked at me with those judgmental eyes and said, "Fix it, Nia. Your sister needs to look presentable for her brand." So I paid. I paid $600 so Jasmine could have new hair to look down on me with. I scrolled down. $1,200 at Total Wine and Spirits. That was Brad. He had come over for Sunday dinner and sneered at the bottle of Merlot I brought. He called it swill and poured it down the sink in front of me. He said he only drank aged bourbon because he had a refined palate. He threw a tantrum until I handed over my credit card so he could go buy the good stuff. He came back with 3 bottles and did not even offer me a glass. I scrolled further. $200 at the pharmacy. This one hurt the most. It was for my father Louis. He had suffered a stroke 10 years ago and needed daily medication. I paid for it every single month automatically. But last month when I visited, he thanked Jasmine for buying his pills. My mother had told him that Jasmine used her modeling money to help him. Jasmine did not have modeling money, she had my money. But I stayed silent because I did not want to upset him. I was not a daughter. I was an ATM machine with a pulse. And they had just told the ATM it wasn't welcome in the building anymore. My finger hovered over the screen. I could freeze it all right now. But I waited. I needed one more reason. One final nail in the coffin. As if the universe was listening, my work email pinged. It was a notification from a high-end catering company called The Gilded Table. Invoice number 4092. Thanksgiving Feast Package. Gold tier. Total due $10,000. I frowned. I had not ordered catering. I opened the attachment. The order details were specific. Imported turkey, truffle mac and cheese, Wagyu beef sliders, top-shelf champagne. The delivery address was my parents' house. The billing contact was Nia Wallace. I picked up my desk phone and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "What is it, Nia? I told you we are busy prepping." "Mom, I just got an invoice for $10,000 from a catering company. Did you use my card details?" "Of course I did," Bernice snapped. "Brad said we need the best food to impress his investors. You cannot expect me to cook for 12 people with my arthritis." "But you just uninvited me," I said, my voice low and steady. "You told me I am banned, but you are using my money to feed the people who do not want me there." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, arrogant silence. "It is the least you can do, Nia. Think of it as your contribution. You are not eating the food, but you are helping your sister secure her future. Brad is going to close a big deal with these people. Once they get rich, they will pay you back. Consider it an honor that you can help them, since you cannot do anything impressive yourself." An honor. The word hung in the air between us. She truly believed it. She believed I should be grateful for the opportunity to fund my own exclusion. She believed I was so desperate for connection that I would pay $10,000 to be treated like garbage. "So you are saying I have to pay for a party I am not allowed to attend?" "Don't be petty, Nia. It is ugly. Just pay the bill and do not embarrass us. The payment is due by 5 p.m. today. Make sure it clears." She hung up. I sat there listening to the dial tone. The old Nia would have cried. The old Nia would have felt guilty. The old Nia would have paid the bill hoping that next time they would be nicer. But the old Nia died the moment that phone clicked off. Step 3, complete. I sat back in my leather chair. My heart was beating slow and steady. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was freedom. I picked up my phone one last time. I opened a food delivery app. I found a local pizza chain, the kind that sells greasy cardboard pizza for $5. I ordered 5 pepperoni pizzas to be delivered to my parents' house on Thursday at 6:00 p.m., right when their guests were supposed to sit down for dinner. In the special instructions box, I wrote a note for the driver to tape to the box. "Because I am banned, my money is banned too. Enjoy the feast." The idiot. I hit confirm. Then I opened a travel website. I booked a first-class ticket to the Maldives leaving Wednesday morning. I booked a water villa at a 5-star resort. I booked a spa package. I booked a private boat tour. I packed up my laptop. I put on my coat. I walked out of my office and took the elevator down to the parking garage. As I drove my Audi out onto Peachtree Street, the sun was setting over Atlanta, turning the glass buildings into pillars of fire. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brad. "Did you pay the catering yet? The confirmation hasn't come through. Don't screw this up, Nia. I deleted the message. I blocked his number. I blocked Jasmine. I blocked my mother. I left my father unblocked because I knew he would not call. He never called. I drove home to my quiet, clean apartment. I packed a suitcase with bikinis, silk dresses, and sunscreen. I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine that Brad had tried to steal from me. I toasted to the empty room. The war had started. They just didn't know it yet. They thought they were punishing me. They thought they were putting me in my place. They had no idea that they had just cut their own lifeline. I slept better that night than I had in 10 years. The next morning I was at the airport drinking mimosas in the Delta Sky Club, while my mother was waking up to a house that was about to go dark. The game was over, and I had just flipped the board. Here is the lesson from this story. Your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Family is not a license for abuse, and boundaries are the distance at which you can love yourself and others simultaneously. You cannot buy respect from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is remove your support to force them to stand on their own. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear part 2, subscribe to the channel now. You do not want to miss the fallout when the repo truck arrives. I sat there in the silence of my corner office while the city lights of Atlanta began to flicker on outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was time to go to work. Not the crisis management work I did for clients, but the crisis management of my own life. I pulled up my personal spreadsheet on my laptop. I had organized every single expense I covered for my family. It was a long list, a list that represented 5 years of my silence and their greed. I cracked my knuckles and reached for my phone. It was time to execute the sequence. First on the list was the power company, Georgia Power. I dialed the number and navigated the automated system with the muscle memory of someone who paid the bills on time every single month. When the representative answered, I kept my voice flat and professional. I told them I was moving out of the property on Oak Street. I told them to take my name off the account immediately. The woman on the line hesitated. She asked if I wanted to transfer service to the other adult resident listed at the address Mrs. Bernice Wallace. I said yes, knowing full well what that simple yes would trigger. My mother had a credit score in the low 400s. She had defaulted on 3 loans in the last decade. The moment they ran her social security number, the system would demand a security deposit she did not have. The lights wouldn't just stay on. They would go dark until she coughed up $2,000. I authorized the disconnect for tomorrow morning. I did the same for the water company. No more long hot showers for Jasmine. No more ice maker for Brad's bourbon. Next was the car. This was the one that would hurt Jasmine the most. That Mercedes G-Wagon was her entire personality. It was her prop for every social media post. It was the only reason her friends thought she was successful. Without it, she was just another girl in Atlanta with an attitude and no job. I called the luxury leasing department. I identified myself as the primary leaseholder and financial guarantor. I told the agent I was withdrawing my financial backing effective immediately. He sounded concerned. He asked if I understood that this would trigger a default, since the secondary driver had no proof of income on file. I told him I understood perfectly. I told him the vehicle was currently in the possession of an unauthorized driver who was refusing to return it. I gave them the address. I told them the car was parked in the driveway right now. I told them to bring the tow truck tomorrow during dinner service. I wanted it gone. I wanted the neighbors to see it hook up to the truck. It was petty. It was cruel. And it was exactly what they deserved. Then there was Brad, my brother-in-law, who thought he was the next big thing in finance. He demanded I pay for the highest-tier business fiber optic internet package so he could trade his crypto coins with zero latency. He spent all day in my parents' guest room staring at charts and pretending to make millions while actually losing my sister's money. I called the internet provider. I told them to cancel the business package. The agent tried to upsell me to keep me as a customer. I told him I was leaving the country and shutting down operations. I told him to cut the line at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Without high-speed internet, Brad was just a man in a rented suit staring at a loading screen. His entire facade of being a high-powered trader would vanish the moment that modem light turned red. He wouldn't be able to show his investors his charts. He wouldn't be able to stream his music. He would be offline and irrelevant. Finally, the grand finale. The catering. I looked at that invoice one last time. $10,000 for a family that wouldn't even let me sit at the table. $10,000 for people who called me an idiot. I called the gilded table back. The owner answered this time. He knew me. He knew my firm. I told him there was a change of plans. I told him that the event was canceled due to unforeseen family circumstances and unauthorized use of my credit card. He was disappointed about the revenue, but he valued my business reputation more than one dinner. He agreed to refund the deposit to my card immediately. There would be no imported turkey, no truffle mac and cheese, no Wagyu beef sliders. But I couldn't leave them with absolutely nothing. That would be too easy. I wanted to send a message. I wanted them to understand exactly what they were worth to me now. I opened a food delivery app. I found a pizza place, not a nice artisanal pizzeria with wood-fired ovens. I found the kind of chain restaurant that served greasy cardboard circles under heat lamps. I ordered 5 large pepperoni pizzas. I requested them to be delivered at exactly 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, right when they planned to seat their elite guests. In the special instructions box, I wrote a note for the driver to tape to the top of the stack. I typed it out slowly, savoring every letter. Since I am banned, my money is banned too. Enjoy the feast. Signed, the idiot. I hit confirm. I watched the little circle spin until it said order received. I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. It was done. The trap was set. They were sleeping peacefully in a house that was about to turn against them. They were dreaming of a party that would never happen. I closed my laptop. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city one last time. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. I was not their bank anymore. I was not their doormat. I was free. And tomorrow, they would find out exactly how expensive their disrespect really was. The ride to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was smooth and quiet, a stark contrast to the noise filling my family's group chat. I did not check the messages. I did not need to. I knew exactly what they were saying. They were probably wondering why I had not replied to the demands for more ice, or why I had not confirmed the arrival time of the catering. I handed my bags to the porter at the curbside check-in and walked straight toward the private security line. There is a specific kind of silence that money buys. It is not just the absence of noise, but the absence of friction. While my mother was likely screaming at my father to fix a thermostat that would not budge, I was gliding through a TSA pre-check lane with no one in front of me. I made my way to the Delta Sky Club. The glass doors slid open and the air changed. It smelled of expensive perfume and fresh espresso. I found a secluded corner by the window where I could watch the planes taxiing on the runway. A server appeared almost instantly. I ordered a glass of their finest champagne. When it arrived, the bubbles danced in the flute, golden and crisp. I took a sip and let the cold liquid settle my nerves. I was really doing this. I was really leaving them to face the consequences of their own entitlement. I pulled my phone out of my purse one last time before the flight. I wanted to see the calm before the storm. I opened Instagram. The first thing on my feed was Jasmine. Of course it was. She had posted a story 5 minutes ago. I tapped the circle around her profile picture. The image filled my screen. It was a mirror selfie taken in her bedroom at my parents' house. She was wearing a shimmering gold-sequined gown that looked tight enough to cut off circulation. It was brand new. I recognized the designer. It cost $2,000. She must have bought it yesterday using the supplementary American Express card I had given her for emergencies. She did not use it for emergencies. She used it to play dress-up. The caption read, "Ready to host the event of the year. Grateful for this blessed life. Hashtag rich life. Hashtag boss babe." I let out a short, dry laugh that turned a few heads in the lounge. She had no idea that the piece of plastic in her wallet was now just a piece of scrap metal. She had no idea that the next time she tried to swipe that card for a latte or a tube of lipstick, the machine would beep a harsh rejection. She was preening in a dress that was effectively stolen property paid for by a sister she called an idiot. She looked happy. She looked arrogant. She looked like someone who had never heard the word no in her entire life. That was about to change. I swiped to the next story. It was Brad. He had posted a video. The camera panned over the dining room table, which was set with the fine china I had bought for my mother 10 years ago. In the center of the frame was a bottle of the vintage Cabernet Sauvignon I had purchased for a client gift last week, but which my mother had swiped from my car trunk when I was not looking. Brad's hand came into view holding a crystal goblet filled to the brim. The caption was overlaid in bold white text. "Only drinking the good stuff tonight. Big deals coming. Thanks, Mom-in-law, for the hookup." He was drinking a $500 bottle of wine like it was grape juice. He was thanking my mother, who had never spent a dime on wine in her life. He was toasting to a future that did not exist using resources he had not earned. He looked so comfortable in my parents' house. He looked like he owned the place. He did not know that in less than 24 hours, he would not even have internet access to upload his next story. He did not know that the G-Wagon parked in the driveway was already flagged in the system for repossession. He was celebrating a victory lap before he had even started the race. I stared at their faces for a long moment. Jasmine's pouty lips and dead eyes, Brad's flushed cheeks and unearned confidence. They looked so secure. They looked so safe in the bubble I had built for them. They thought the walls were made of steel, but they were made of my patience. And my patience had just run out. I did not feel angry anymore. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. It was almost fascinating to watch them dangling over the precipice, unaware that the ground had already vanished. I was the only one who could see the fall coming. I was the only one who knew that the lights were about to go out. I closed the app. I did not block them yet. I wanted to see the aftermath. But for now, I was done. I turned off my notifications. I set my phone to do not disturb. I took another sip of champagne and looked out at the plane that would take me halfway across the world. Let them laugh. Let them drink my wine and wear my clothes. Let them enjoy these last few hours of their delusion. Because when the sun came up tomorrow, they would wake up in a very different world. A world where bills had to be paid and actions had consequences. "Cheers to the idiot," I whispered to the empty chair across from me. Then I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward the gate, ready to disappear. While I was crossing the Atlantic Ocean wrapped in a cashmere blanket, 24 hours before the turkey was supposed to be carved, the first cracks began to appear in the fortress of entitlement I had left behind. The timing was mathematical. I knew their schedules better than they knew themselves. Jasmine was at the Luminous Spa in Buckhead. She had booked the platinum package, which included a diamond dust facial and a hot stone massage. She needed to look perfect for the investors Brad had promised were coming. She walked up to the marble counter glowing from the treatment and handed over the supplementary American Express card I had given her 3 years ago. She did not even look at the receptionist. She was too busy taking selfies in the mirror, adjusting her hair to catch the light. The receptionist swiped the card. A sharp beep echoed in the quiet lobby. "Declined." Jasmine laughed it off. She told the girl to try again. She said the chip must be dirty. The girl tried again. This time she looked at the screen and lowered her voice. "It says call for authorization, ma'am. The card has been reported lost or stolen." The air in the room shifted. The other patrons looked up from their magazines. Jasmine's smile faltered. She pulled out her phone and dialed my number. One ring, straight to voicemail. She dialed again. And again. Panic started to prick at the edges of her perfect foundation. She could not pay. She did not have $500 in her own account. She had to do the one thing she hated more than anything. She had to call our mother. Bernice had to drive 20 minutes in rush hour traffic to bring a wad of crumpled cash she had been saving for her bingo night. When she walked into the spa, she was not angry at Jasmine. She was annoyed with the world. She paid the bill while glaring at the receptionist. She told Jasmine it was just a banking glitch. She said Nia probably forgot to update a security setting because she was so busy with her little assistant job. She refused to see the truth, even when it was printed in red ink on the receipt. They left the spa arm in arm, convincing themselves that the system was broken, not their lifestyle. Back at the house, Brad was in his element. He had set up a ring light and a green screen in the guest bedroom, which he called his office. He was live streaming to his 300 followers about the mindset of a billionaire. He was wearing a suit jacket over basketball shorts because the frame cut off at the waist. He was mid-sentence talking about how passive income was the only way to escape the matrix when the stream froze. The little wheels spun on his screen. Connection lost. He checked his phone. No Wi-Fi. He checked his laptop. No connection. The high-speed business line I paid $300 a month for was dead. He did not just lose his audience. He lost his access to the charts he was addicted to watching. He stormed out of the room screaming for my mother. He slammed his fist into the drywall, leaving a dent. He demanded to know why the bills were not paid. He shouted, asking what kind of house this was, where the utilities just vanished. Bernice was terrified. She had never seen him this angry. She scrambled to find the paper bill in the junk drawer. She called the service provider on speakerphone while Brad paced back and forth like a caged animal chewing on his fingernails. The automated voice asked for the account number. She found it. Then it asked for the 4-digit security PIN to make changes or speak to a representative. Bernice froze. She looked at Brad. She looked at Jasmine. None of them knew it. I was the only one who knew it. I had set it up 5 years ago to stop them from ordering expensive pay-per-view movies without asking. She tried her birth year. Incorrect. She tried the last 4 digits of her social security number. Incorrect. The automated voice informed her that the account was locked for security purposes and disconnected the call. Brad screamed that this was sabotage. Bernice insisted it was just a storm knocking out the lines somewhere in the city. She told him to calm down. She told him Nia would fix it when she arrived tomorrow. She still believed I was coming. She still believed the doormat would return to lie in front of the door. She had no idea that the doormat was currently 30,000 feet in the air and that the darkness in the house was just beginning. They sat in the kitchen that night, using their limited cellular data, wondering why the smart thermostat was not responding to their voice commands. They did not realize the internet cut had taken down the smart home hub too. The house was slowly turning into a brick, and they were trapped inside it waiting for a savior who had already resigned. 5 o'clock arrived on Thanksgiving Day, bringing with it the twilight and the guests my brother-in-law had been so desperate to impress. I can picture the scene perfectly from my villa in the Maldives. The driveway filled up with leased luxury sedans and ride-share vehicles. These were the elite investors Brad had promised. Men in tight suits who spoke in buzzwords about blockchain and decentralization. Women who looked like carbon copies of Jasmine holding clutches that cost more than my parents' mortgage payment. They walked up the front steps expecting a palace. What they stepped into was a sauna. The air inside the house was thick and heavy. The Georgia humidity had seeped into the walls during the day, and without the industrial air conditioning unit running, the atmosphere was suffocating. Brad met them at the door. He was already sweating through his dress shirt. He shook hands with a clammy grip. When the first guest, a man named Sterling, who claimed to own a digital real estate empire, tugged at his collar and asked why it was so warm, Brad went into damage control mode. He laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. He told them the smart home system was undergoing a mandatory firmware update. He said it was the price of living on the cutting edge of technology. He claimed the cooling would kick back on in 10 minutes. It was a lie. The thermostat on the wall was a blank black square. It was dead, just like his career. Jasmine was trying to hold court in the living room. She was wearing the gold sequined dress she had bought with the stolen card. Under the dim battery-powered emergency lights she had scattered around to hide the lack of overhead lighting, she looked shimmering and desperate. She was fanning herself with a cocktail napkin, trying to keep her foundation from melting off her face. She offered guests warm white wine because the ice maker in the fridge had stopped working hours ago. The guests sipped the tepid liquid and exchanged confused glances. This was not the luxury experience they had been promised on Instagram. The influencers were checking their phones, trying to find a signal to post about the disaster, but the Wi-Fi was dead, and the cell reception inside the thick brick walls was spotty at best. But the heat was manageable. The heat could be ignored with enough alcohol. The silence from the kitchen, however, was deafening. By 5:30, the dining room table was set with the fine china and crystal glasses. But the platters were empty. The gold-rimmed serving bowls were collecting dust. The smell of roasting turkey and savory sage stuffing was conspicuously absent. There was no aroma of truffle mac and cheese wafting through the halls. There was only the smell of expensive cologne turning sour in the heat. My mother, Bernice, was pacing in the kitchen. She was staring out the window, watching the street for the catering van. The van that I had canceled 48 hours ago. She checked her phone for the 100th time. She dialed the number for the gilded table again. It went straight to voicemail. The office was closed for the holiday. She turned to Brad, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. She asked him where the food was. Brad checked his watch. He told the guests that the delivery driver was just stuck in holiday traffic. He said the food would be even better because of the anticipation. 5:45 passed, then 6 o'clock. The guests were getting restless. Their stomachs were growling. The conversation about crypto yields and follower counts was dying out, replaced by whispered complaints. A woman named Chloe asked if there were at least some appetizers. Jasmine ran to the pantry and found a box of stale crackers. She put them on a silver tray and carried them out like they were caviar. The guests looked at the crackers, and then at each other. The illusion was cracking. They were sitting in a sweltering house drinking warm wine and eating saltines. This was the elite Thanksgiving Brad had sold them. And the host, the woman who paid for it all, was 4,000 miles away, dipping her toes in the Indian Ocean while they starved in the dark. At 6:15, the doorbell finally rang. The sound cut through the heavy, humid silence of the living room like a gunshot. My mother, Bernice, practically jumped out of her skin. She smoothed down her dress and plastered a wide, relieved smile onto her face. She announced to the room that the feast had arrived. She told everyone to prepare themselves for a culinary experience. She rushed to the door with Brad and Jasmine trailing close behind her, eager to help carry in the silver platters they were expecting. The guests perked up, shifting in their seats and looking toward the hallway. They were ready for the Wagyu beef and the truffles. They were ready to be impressed. Bernice threw the door open with a flourish. She was expecting a team of servers in black ties. She was expecting the owner of the catering company, apologizing profusely for the delay. Instead, she found a teenager named Kevin. Kevin was wearing a stained polo shirt and a backwards baseball cap. He was holding a thermal bag that had seen better days. He was not driving a refrigerated catering van. He had pulled up in a rusted sedan that was idling loudly in the driveway, leaking oil onto the pavement. Bernice froze. She blinked at the boy. She asked him where the caterers were. Kevin just looked at her and popped his gum. He asked if this was the Wallace residence. He said he had a delivery for a Nia Wallace. Bernice tried to shoo him away. She told him he had the wrong house. She told him they were waiting for a 5-star meal, not fast food. But Brad stepped forward. He saw the logo on the bag. He smelled the distinct aroma of cheap pepperoni and garlic butter. He knew. Kevin pulled out 5 large cardboard boxes. The grease was already seeping through the bottom of the stack. He handed them to Brad, who took them reflexively. Then Kevin handed Bernice a receipt and a small white envelope taped to the top box. He said the order was prepaid, including the tip, and walked back to his car. Bernice stood in the open doorway, letting the humid evening air mix with the stifling heat of the house. She looked down at the boxes in Brad's arms. They were from a discount pizza chain. The kind you order for a child's sleepover, not a high-stakes investor dinner. The logo on the box seemed to mock her. She ripped the envelope off the box. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost tore the note inside. She pulled out the index card. I had written it carefully. I wanted to make sure the message was clear. She read it silently first, her lips moving along with the words. Then she read it again. Her face went from pale to a mottled red. Brad asked what it said. He was trying to keep his voice low, hoping the guests in the living room couldn't hear. But the house was silent. Everyone was listening. Bernice didn't answer him. She just dropped the hand holding the note. Brad snatched it from her. He read it, and his eyes bulged. Because I am banned, my money is banned too. Enjoy the feast, the idiot. The silence in the hallway was broken by a sound from the living room. It was a snicker, then a giggle, then a full-blown laugh. Sterling, the digital real estate mogul, was laughing. He stood up and walked over to the hallway, peering at the stack of pizzas. He asked if this was the grand investment opportunity Brad had been talking about. He asked if the blockchain was powered by mozzarella. The other guests joined in. The tension that had been building for hours broke, but not in the way my family wanted. It broke into ridicule. The women with the expensive clutches started whispering behind their hands. They were not laughing with my family. They were laughing at them. They realized in that moment that everything was a lie. The mansion with no air conditioning, the G-Wagon outside, the talk of elite connections. It was all a facade held together by a woman they had banned from the table. Brad turned a deep shade of purple. He tried to stammer an excuse. He said it was a prank. He said the real food was still coming. He tried to laugh it off, saying that even billionaires liked a slice of pepperoni sometimes. But nobody was buying it. The air of superiority he had worn all night evaporated, leaving him looking small and sweaty, holding a stack of greasy cardboard. Jasmine was the one who snapped. She had been standing in the background, watching her social standing disintegrate in real time. She looked at the guests who were now checking their watches and gathering their purses. She looked at Brad, who was failing to control the room. She looked at the pizza. The smell of it made her nauseous. It smelled like poverty. It smelled like the life she thought she had escaped. She let out a scream that sounded more like a feral animal than an influencer. She snatched the top box from Brad's hands. She didn't open it. She didn't check the toppings. She just hurled it. The box flew across the room and hit the wall with a wet thud. It slid down, leaving a trail of tomato sauce and cheese on the expensive wallpaper. The pizza landed face down on the hardwood floor. Pepperoni slices scattered like confetti. Jasmine screamed that I was jealous. She screamed that I was trying to ruin her life because I was miserable. She stomped her foot right next to the fallen pizza, her gold sequins shaking with her rage. She demanded that someone fix this. She looked at Bernice. She looked at Brad, but nobody moved. The guests stopped laughing. Now they just looked uncomfortable. They looked at the stain on the wall. They looked at the sweat dripping down Brad's face. They looked at each other with a silent agreement. This was over. The party was over. The deal was over. Sterling was the first to move toward the door. He patted Brad on the shoulder with a condescending tap. He said it was an unforgettable evening. He said he would be in touch, but his tone made it clear he would block Brad's number before he even got to his car. The other guests followed him, filing out past the open pizza boxes like they were escaping a crime scene. Bernice stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the doorframe. She watched them leave. She watched the cars pull away one by one. She watched her reputation drive down the street. She turned to look at the mess in the hallway. The pizza on the floor, the sauce on the wall, and the note lying face up on the rug. The idiot. They were alone in the dark, hot house with 4 pizzas and a ruin that was entirely of their own making. And I was 4,000 miles away, ordering another round of drinks. The darkness inside the house was absolute, save for the flickering orange glow of 3 scented candles my mother had salvaged from the bathroom. The air conditioning was dead, and the heavy Georgia humidity had settled over them like a wet wool blanket. The elite investors and high society influencers were huddled around the dining table, not feasting on imported turkey or truffle mac and cheese, but picking at cold, greasy pepperoni pizza from cardboard boxes. The silence was thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the sound of chewing and the occasional slap of a hand swatting a mosquito that had wandered in through the open door. It was a tableau of total humiliation. They were trapped in a sweltering mansion eating fast food in the dark, pretending that this was somehow a bohemian chic experience rather than a catastrophe. Then the ground began to vibrate. It started as a low rumble felt in the soles of their feet before they heard it with their ears. It was the guttural, mechanical roar of a heavy-duty diesel engine. It was not the smooth purr of a luxury sedan arriving to whisk the guests away. It was the sound of raw industrial power. Bright amber lights began to flash through the front bay windows, sweeping across the living room walls like a lighthouse warning of a shipwreck. The strobe effect illuminated the guests' faces in harsh, rhythmic bursts, revealing their sweat and their disdain. Jasmine dropped her slice of pizza. It landed cheese side down on the Persian rug, but she did not notice. Her eyes were locked on the window. She knew that sound. She ran to the front door, her gold sequins clinking together like armor. Brad followed her, stumbling in the dark, his face pale in the flashing amber light. The guests trailed behind them, drawn by a morbid curiosity that was the only entertainment left for the evening. Outside in the driveway, a massive flatbed tow truck had backed up to the front of the house. The air brakes hissed with a violent release of pressure that sounded like a judgment. The driver, a man with forearms the size of tree trunks and a face that had seen every excuse in the book, hopped down from the cab. He was wearing a reflective vest that shone brightly under the truck's work lights. He did not look at the mansion. He did not look at the people in expensive clothes standing on the porch. He looked at the matte black Mercedes G-Wagon parked in the center of the driveway. Jasmine let out a shriek that tore through the humid night air. She scrambled down the front steps, her high heels clicking frantically on the stone. She threw herself between the truck and the SUV, spreading her arms wide, as if she could physically block the tons of steel backing toward her. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "What are you doing? That is my car. Get away from it." The driver did not stop. He walked past her with the indifference of a man just doing a job. He began unspooling the heavy steel chains from the winch. The metal clanked loudly against the pavement. "I said, get away from my car!" Jasmine yelled again, lunging at him. Brad caught her by the arm, holding her back. The driver paused and looked at his clipboard. He clicked a pen and checked a box. He looked at Jasmine with tired eyes. "This vehicle is listed for immediate repossession," he said, his voice flat and loud enough to carry to the porch where the guests were watching. "The leaseholder reported financial insolvency and withdrew the payment guarantee this morning." Jasmine froze. The words hung in the air. Financial insolvency. It was a fancy way of saying broke. It was a legal way of saying fraud. "That is a lie," she spat out. "My sister pays for this. It is my car. She gave it to me." The driver shook his head. He walked around to the back of the SUV and hooked the chains onto the undercarriage. The metal groaned as it bit into the frame. "The paperwork says Nia Wallace is the owner," he said, tightening the winch. "She called it in personally. She said the current driver has no income and no authorization to operate the vehicle. She said you cannot afford the gas, let alone the lease. It is over, lady. Pay the full balance right now or step aside." He looked at her, waiting. He knew she did not have the money. The monthly payment on a G-Wagon was more than Jasmine had made in the last 2 years combined. She stood there trembling, her hands clenched into fists, her face a mask of ruined mascara and sweat. She looked at Brad. Brad looked at his shoes. He had no crypto wallet to save her. He had no millions. He had nothing. On the porch, the silence broke. Sterling, the investor who had been promised a technological empire, let out a low whistle. He turned to the woman next to him. So they do not own the house, he said, his voice carrying perfectly in the quiet night. They do not have power, and they do not even own the car. The woman laughed a cruel, sharp sound. They are phony, she said. They are completely fake. I bet even the clothes are rented. Brad turned around, his face burning with shame. He tried to speak. He tried to salvage the unsalvageable. Guys, it is just a misunderstanding, he stammered. My sister-in-law is having a mental breakdown. She is just trying to hurt us. I will write a check right now. Sterling cut him off with a wave of his hand. He walked down the steps past the weeping Jasmine and the silent tow truck driver. Don't bother, Brad, he said. We have seen enough. I do not do business with people who cannot even keep the lights on. Delete my number. He walked to his own car, a legitimate luxury sedan that he actually owned, and unlocked the doors. The other guests followed him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. They walked past Jasmine without looking at her. They stepped around the tow truck chains. They got into their cars and started their engines. The driveway filled with the red glow of taillights as they reversed out one by one, leaving the family alone in the driveway. The tow truck driver finished securing the chains. He walked back to the cab and pulled a lever. The hydraulic winch whined into life. The front end of the G-Wagon lifted off the ground. The car that Jasmine had built her entire identity around, the symbol of her supposed success, tilted backward at an unnatural angle. It looked helpless. It looked like a dead thing being dragged away. Jasmine collapsed onto the driveway. She did not scream anymore. She just sobbed quietly, sitting in the dirt in her $2,000 dress, watching her world disappear. Bernice stood in the doorway of the dark house, clutching her chest, her face gray in the flashing amber lights. She looked old. For the first time, she looked truly old. The illusion she had spent a lifetime crafting, the facade of wealth and superiority, had been stripped away in less than 10 minutes, leaving only the rot underneath. The driver climbed into the truck. He released the air brake with another loud hiss. He put the truck in gear and pulled away. The G-Wagon bounced slightly as it rolled down the driveway, following the tow truck into the night. The family stood there in the darkness. The amber lights faded into the distance, leaving them with nothing but the moonlight and the humid chirping of crickets. The house behind them was a black void. The driveway was empty. The guests were gone. The food was gone. The car was gone. They were standing in the wreckage of their own entitlement. And for the first time in their lives, there was no one left to blame but themselves. No Nia to fix it. No Nia to pay for it. Just the silence and the dark. I was lying on a teak lounge chair overlooking the turquoise water of the Indian Ocean. The sun was warm on my skin, a sharp contrast to the cold, dark driveway I knew my family was standing in 4,000 miles away. I reached for my phone, which had been silent for 12 hours. I turned off the flight mode. The device nearly vibrated out of my hand. It convulsed with a digital backlog of rage. 67 missed calls, 104 text messages, 30 voicemails. I pressed play on the first voicemail. It was my mother, Bernice. Her voice was a shriek that distorted the speaker. She demanded I turn the power back on immediately. She called me ungrateful. She threatened to call the police, though she did not say for what crime. Then came Jasmine. She was sobbing in the background of a message Brad had left. She wasn't sad, she was hysterical. She screamed that I had ruined her reputation and that her followers would think she was poor. Brad's voice was different. It was cold and threatening. He said I had interfered with his business and that he would sue me for damages. As the timestamps on the messages moved later into the night, the tone shifted from aggression to desperation. The anger turned into begging. My mother asked how they were supposed to sleep without heat. She asked what they were supposed to eat since the refrigerator was off. Jasmine apologized, but it sounded hollow, like she was reading a script she didn't believe. They were bargaining with a ghost. Then I saw a text from my father, Louis. It was separate from the group chat. It was short, and it was typed with trembling fingers. Daughter, come home. They are screaming. I think they are going to hurt each other. Please. I set the phone down on the small table next to my iced tea. I looked at the horizon where the blue water met the blue sky. I could have stayed. I could have let them tear each other apart in the dark for a week while I got a massage. But there was one loose end left. One final secret that was sitting in a safe deposit box back in Atlanta. The deed to the house. They thought they were fighting over who paid the bills. They did not know they were squatting in my property. I picked up the hotel room phone and dialed the concierge. I told him to cancel the rest of my stay. I needed the next flight back to Atlanta. He asked if there was an emergency. I told him no. It was just time to close a deal. I stood up and walked back into the villa to pack. I was going home, not to save them, but to finish them. The smell hit me the moment I pushed open the front door. It was a thick, suffocating stench of stagnant air, unwashed bodies, and plumbing that had not been flushed in 3 days. The house on Oak Street, which had been the envy of the neighborhood just 72 hours ago, now felt like a tomb. I clicked on the heavy tactical flashlight I had brought with me. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the hallway, where the sauce from the thrown pizza was still drying on the expensive wallpaper like a crime scene. I walked into the living room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of shallow breathing. They were huddled together on the designer sofas, wrapped in every blanket they could find. Brad was pacing by the window, trying to get a signal on his dying phone, his suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. Jasmine was curled in a ball, her gold-sequined dress now dull and twisted around her legs. My father Louis sat in his armchair, staring blankly at the dark television screen. Bernice was the first to react. She scrambled up from the couch, her hair wild and her face twisted in a snarl. She did not look like the composed matriarch who had banned me from dinner. She looked like a cornered animal. She rushed at me, her hand raised to strike. It was a reflex born of years of unchecked authority. She thought she could slap me back into submission. She thought she could beat the obedience back into me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply reached out and caught her wrist in midair. My grip was firm. I held her there for a second, letting her feel the strength she had ignored for decades. Then I pushed her back. It was not a violent shove, just a firm dismissal. She stumbled backward, collapsing onto the sofa cushions, gasping for air. "You ungrateful wretch!" she screamed, her voice cracking in the dry air. "You are heartless. You are a monster. Look at what you have done. You destroyed this family. You ruined everything we built. How dare you come back here after humiliating us?" I stood over her, the flashlight beam casting long shadows against the walls. I looked at the woman who had banned me from a dinner I paid for. I looked at the sister who had mocked me. I looked at the brother-in-law who had used me. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold resolve. "I did not destroy anything, Mother," I said, my voice calm and echoing in the silent house. "I simply stopped paying for the tickets to your circus. I stopped keeping the lights on for a show I was not allowed to watch. You built a life on a foundation of my money, and then you kicked out the pillar holding it up. This isn't destruction, this is gravity." Brad stepped forward, trying to summon some of his lost bravado. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You owe me," he spat. "You ruined my business deals. My investors walked because of your stunt. You are going to write me a check for damages right now, or I swear I will sue you for every dime you have." I turned the beam of the flashlight onto his face, blinding him momentarily. "You cannot sue me, Brad, because you do not have a lawyer. You do not have money for a retainer. You do not even have a car to drive to the courthouse. And as for your investors, they did not leave because of the pizza. They left because they saw you for what you are. A fraud sitting in the dark." Jasmine sat up, wiping mascara from her cheeks. "Why are you doing this, Nia?" she whined, her voice reverting to the childish tone she used to get her way. "I just wanted a nice Thanksgiving. I just wanted to be happy. You are just jealous because I am beautiful and you are alone." I looked at her huddled in the dark, shivering in a $2,000 dress she could not pay for. "I am not alone, Jasmine," I said. "I am free. And beauty does not pay the electric bill. Beauty does not flush the toilet. You are sitting in filth, Because you never learned how to survive without a host. My father spoke from his chair. His voice was weak. Nia, please. Just turn the power back on. We can talk about this later. Just fix it. I looked at him, the enabler who had watched me drown for years and never threw a rope. I am not here to fix it, Dad. I am not here to turn the lights back on. I am here to close the account. I walked over to the dining table and set my bag down. The sound of the heavy leather hitting the wood made them all jump. I unzipped it slowly. I was not here to negotiate. I was here to deliver the final bill. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers. They hit the table with a heavy thud that made everyone jump. I did not need to shout. The truth was loud enough. I fanned out the credit reports and bank statements under the beam of my flashlight, exposing the lies they had lived by. Brad. I said, my voice cutting through the humid air. You have been walking around this house acting like you own the block. You tell everyone you are a crypto visionary. You tell them you are on the verge of a breakthrough. But I have your bank statement right here. I shined the light on the paper, highlighting the red numbers at the bottom. Your checking account is overdrawn by $500. You have not made a successful trade in 6 months. Every single luxury you have enjoyed, every bottle of bourbon, every steak dinner, every new suit has been paid for by the allowance I send to my mother. You are not a millionaire. You are a dependent. You are a 30-year-old man living on his sister-in-law's charity. Brad opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. He looked at the paper, then at me, his face draining of color. The facade was gone. He looked small and pathetic in the harsh light. I turned to Jasmine. She was trying to shrink into the sofa, her eyes wide with fear. And you, Jasmine, you think you are an influencer. You think you are a star. But look at this. I threw another stack of receipts at her. They fluttered down like dead leaves. These are for your Botox appointments. These are for your designer rentals. These are for your hair extensions. Every single thing that makes you feel beautiful was paid for by the sister you call an idiot. Without my credit card, you are not a hot girl. You are just a broke girl in a dark house wearing a dress you cannot afford to dry clean. You are a zero, Jasmine. A complete financial zero. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Brad made a sound. It was a laugh, but it was ugly and cruel. He looked at Jasmine with pure disgust. He did not look at me. He looked at his wife like she was something he had stepped in. You lied to me, he spat. You told me your family had money. You told me you had a trust fund. You are nothing. You are just trash. Jasmine reached for him, sobbing. Brad, baby, please. Don't touch me, he yelled, backing away, as if she were contagious. I am done. I am not staying in this dump with a bunch of losers. I am leaving. He turned and stormed out of the house. He did not even look back. The front door slammed shut, leaving us in the silence. Jasmine collapsed onto the floor, wailing. She curled into a ball, her golden dress pooling around her like a puddle of oil. She was broken. Her husband was gone. Her image was destroyed. Her reality had finally crashed down on her. And I just stood there watching. Bernice stood there, panting, her chest heaving with a mix of exhaustion and pure rage. She looked around the ruined living room where the darkness was pressing in on all sides. Her golden child was sobbing on the floor like a toddler, and her husband was shrinking into the shadows in the corner. She needed a win. She needed to regain control of the narrative she had lost. She pointed a shaking finger at the front door, her nails digging into the air. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate, echoing off the walls. "Get out of my house right now! You think you can come here and humiliate us? You think you can wave your money around and rule over us? This is my home. I am the matriarch here. I want you gone, Nia. I want you off my property this instant." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, but never mothered me. She was clinging to the last shred of authority she thought she possessed. She thought the walls around us were her shield. She thought the roof over her head was her divine right. It was almost tragic how wrong she was. I did not yell back. I did not need to raise my voice to make the foundation of her world crumble. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. It was the smile of someone who held the aces while their opponent was betting with Monopoly money. "Your house?" I asked softly. The question hung in the humid air like smoke. "Mom, you have a very selective memory." I reached into my bag one last time. I pulled out a blue legal folder. It was thin and unassuming, but it held the weight of their entire existence. I walked over to the coffee table and placed it down next to the flashlight. I opened it to the first page. It was a deed. A property deed recorded in the Fulton County records. "Do you remember 5 years ago?" I asked, looking from my mother to my father. Louis flinched. He remembered. "Do you remember when Dad lost his pension at the casino? Do you remember the foreclosure notices that started piling up in the mailbox? The bank was not just threatening to take the house, Mom. They had already scheduled the auction." Bernice went still. Her eyes darted to Louis, then back to the paper on the table. "You told everyone Dad was sick," I continued. "You told the neighbors it was a clerical error. You lived in denial while the sheriff was getting ready to put a padlock on the door. You were going to be homeless. You were packing boxes in secret." I tapped the document with my index finger. "Who do you think stopped it? Who do you think walked into the bank with a cashier's check for $200,000 and paid off the arrears and the remaining principal?" "It wasn't your prayers, Mom. And it certainly wasn't Dad's luck." I shined the flashlight directly on the line that mattered, the line that designated the grantee. "The owner," read the name I said. Bernice leaned forward, squinting in the harsh light. She read it. I saw her lips form the words, even though no sound came out. "Nia Wallace." "I bought it," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I bought it to save you from the street. I paid off the debt. I paid the taxes every year since. I paid for the new roof last summer. I paid for the landscaping that you bragged to your friends about. This isn't your house, Bernice. It is mine. Every brick, every beam, every square inch of this floor you are standing on belongs to the daughter you banned from Thanksgiving." My father put his head in his hands. He began to weep softly. He had known. He had signed the papers. He had let me save them, and then let his wife treat me like a servant in my own property for half a decade. "I let you stay here because of family," I said, my voice hardening. "I let you play house because I thought that despite everything we were blood. I thought that my generosity would buy me a seat at the table. But you showed me that no amount of money can buy respect from people who are committed to despising you. You took the roof I gave you and tried to lock me out of it." I closed the folder. The sound was final, like a gavel striking a block. "The charity stops tonight. You wanted me gone. Fine. But if I go, the house goes with me." I looked at them huddled in the dark, stripped of their pretenses. "You have 30 days, I said. "That is the legal minimum for evicting tenants at will. 30 days to pack your things. 30 days to find a new place to live with no credit and no income. If you are not out by noon on December 26th, I will call the sheriff. I will have you removed as trespassers. And unlike you, I won't need to lie to the neighbors about why the police are here." Bernice opened her mouth to speak, to beg, to scream, but nothing came out. The reality of her position had finally crashed down on her. She wasn't the queen of the castle. She was a guest who had overstayed her welcome, and the landlord had just served notice. I picked up the folder and put it back in my bag. I picked up my flashlight. I turned my back on them and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see their faces. I knew exactly what they looked like. They looked like people who had just realized that the bridge they burned was the only way home. I walked out into the cool night air. The humidity had broken. The sky was clear. I got into my car and started the engine. As I drove away, I saw the house disappear in the rearview mirror, a dark silhouette against the stars. It was just a building now, an asset to be liquidated. I was leaving the past in the dark, and I was driving toward a future that was bright, paid for, and entirely mine. The 30 days passed like a slow, suffocating countdown. When the sheriff finally came to escort Bernice out, she did not scream. She just looked small. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a complex on the outskirts of the city. It was government-subsidized housing. The walls were thin, and the carpet smelled of old cigarettes. There was no space for her fine china or her oversized furniture. She tried to call her friends, the women she used to drink tea with, and gossip about the neighbors, but her phone calls went unanswered. The moment she could no longer host the extravagant dinners or chip in for the charity galas, she became invisible to them. She sat alone in her cramped living room, staring at the peeling paint, realizing that her social standing was nothing more than a rental she could no longer afford. Jasmine's fall was even harder. I had been meticulous with the finances. While I paid the bills, I had ensured that the credit cards she used for her personal shopping sprees were legally in her name, even if I had been making the payments. When I stopped paying, the creditors did not call me, they called her. To avoid bankruptcy and a lawsuit, she had to get a job, a real job. She applied to boutiques and salons, but without experience or a reference, she was rejected. She ended up at Walmart. I saw her once when I stopped in to buy a charger. She was wearing a blue vest, standing behind a register scanning items for a woman who looked exactly like the person Jasmine used to pretend to be. She looked tired. Her nails were bare and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She did not see me. She was too busy trying to explain to a customer why her coupon was invalid. The golden child was finally learning the value of $1 the hard way. My father was the only one I saved. I could not leave him in that toxicity. On moving day, I pulled up in a private ambulance. I told Bernice that I was taking him to a facility where he would get the medical attention she had neglected for years. She tried to protest, claiming he was her husband and she needed his pension check. I handed her the divorce papers instead. I moved Louis into the Avenues, a luxury assisted living facility with 24-hour care and a garden view. For the first time in a decade, he looked peaceful. He was away from the shouting and the demands. He was safe. I visited him every Sunday. We did not talk much about the past. We just sat in the garden and watched the birds. He held my hand sometimes and squeezed it. It was enough. The separation was complete. The parasites were removed and the host was finally healing. It was exactly 1 year later. The house on Oak Street was unrecognizable. I had gutted it down to the studs and rebuilt it in my own image. The dark, cramped hallways were gone, replaced by an open-concept floor plan, flooded with light. The kitchen where my mother used to scream at me was now a chef's paradise, with marble countertops and a wolf range that was currently roasting a heritage turkey. The air smelled of rosemary and expensive wine, not desperation. I moved through the crowd of guests in my silk dress, feeling the weight of the crystal glass in my hand. These were not people I paid to be here. These were partners from my firm, fellow board members and friends who had stood by me during the takeover. There was no pretense. No one was live streaming. No one was trying to sell a scam. They were just here to celebrate. I walked over to the kitchen island where Julian was opening another bottle of vintage Bordeaux. He was a senior partner at a law firm downtown, a man who argued cases in front of the Supreme Court. He smiled when he saw me and handed me the glass. He kissed my cheek. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for a favor. He just asked if I was happy. I looked around the room at the life I had built on the ashes of the old one, and I realized that I was. I was finally whole. Then the chime of the smart doorbell echoed softly through the house. It was not a harsh buzz, but a melodic tone. The conversation in the room dipped slightly. I picked up my tablet from the counter. The security feed filled the screen in high definition. It was raining outside, a cold gray drizzle that coated the world in misery. Standing on the front porch was a woman I almost did not recognize. She was hunched over in a thin coat that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair was gray and unkempt, the expensive dye jobs a thing of the past. She was clutching a plastic grocery bag that held a store-bought pumpkin pie, the kind that cost $4. It was Bernice. She looked at the camera lens. Her eyes were hollow. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who had spent a year realizing that gravity only works one way. She raised a shaking hand to press the button again, hoping for entry, hoping for a scrap from the table she used to command. Julian looked over my shoulder. He saw the woman on the screen. He saw the pie. He saw the desperation. "Do you want me to get that?" he asked, his voice low and protective. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. I looked at the ghost of my past standing in the rain. I felt a flicker of something in my chest, but it wasn't guilt. It wasn't anger. It was simply the recognition of a stranger. I turned off the screen. The image vanished, leaving only the reflection of my own smiling face. "No," I said softly, turning back to the warmth of the kitchen. "That is just someone who has the wrong address. Do not open it." Julian nodded understanding without needing an explanation. He wrapped his arm around my waist and turned me back toward the party. I raised my glass to the room. The fire crackled in the hearth. The laughter swelled again, drowning out the sound of the rain against the door. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. It tasted like peace. The screen of my life finally faded to black. Nia's journey reminds us that the most expensive thing you can ever pay for is the approval of people who are committed to misunderstanding you. True family is defined by mutual respect, not by how much abuse you are willing to subsidize. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity, cut the cords, and build a life where you are celebrated, not just tolerated. If this story of reclaiming power resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your own experience with setting boundaries in the comments. Remember, your peace is worth far more than their comfort.